Hi everyone, this is Tammy with Life Began in a Garden. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make Redbud Jelly. So we have a lot of eastern redbuds here, and it doesn't take very long at all to pick some of the blooms off, and they are very nutritious for you, and they make a delicious, beautiful jelly. There are also other uses for the redbud, and I will go over some of those with you in this video. So this is the eastern redbud, and the whole branch of every branch on the tree is covered with these redbuds. So you can use them when they're still a bud and not opened up yet as a flower like these are, or you can use them after they have already opened up. You just need to try to get them before the leaves come out. Pay close attention to how this looks on there and how the buds form. They form in little clusters in different spots all over the branch. Anytime that you're foraging for redbuds or for any other plant that you may be using as an edible or for medical value, make sure that you have properly identified the plant that you're planning to use and that you know that it is what you think it is. Also, do your own research on the plant that you're planning to use to know how it will react in your body, and if you're on any medication that could have an interaction with the purposes of this plant, then you need to know that too. So just make sure you do your research, but a lot of people make redbud jelly using these, and they are full of different nutrients. They are actually 25% protein, which is very high for any plant material to have that much protein in it. So that's great. And this is another use that I'm going to be using the redbud for, other than jelly. I'm making a salad, and this will be my first salad of the year. And this is one of my raised beds. And I have spinach and lettuce growing in there. And I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but when you're growing spinach or lettuce, you don't have to pull up the whole plant to use it. You can just pick the leaves off of the outside edges of the plant. Never take more than maybe 20% of the plant, so that it still has enough to continue growing, but the outer leaves are the bigger ones that formed first on the plant, and as it forms new leaves, they come from the center. So don't take those, but take some from the outer edges. And I have plenty enough of the plants here to take a couple leaves from each one and not harm the plant, and still have enough for my salad. So this is my spinach, and I have several different kinds of lettuce that I'm putting in this salad. So just go through and pick off what you want and add it to your bowl. And there are different things that I have growing that I can put in this salad, but one of the things that I'm going to be adding to it is the redbud blooms. If you eat redbud raw, meaning uncooked, then you're retaining all of the nutritional value that the redbud has. And redbud is very high on vitamin C. And it's also very high on antioxidants, and antioxidants are what your body needs to fight free radicals that cause diseases in your body. These are my carrots from last year's garden. Some of them didn't germinate until quite a bit later, and they didn't get to the full size that they needed to be by the end of fall, so I just left them in the garden. And they overwintered, and they still are great. So these are the little finger top carrots, so they don't get very big anyway, but I'm just pulling up some of them and I'm going to add them to my salad as well. And the leaves of the carrots are also edible, but it's best to get them when they're young leaves. And so I'm not using any of the leaves in this salad because those have been there all winter, so I figure they're probably kind of bitter. But anyway, I'm getting some of those carrots, and then I'm going over to another bed where I have my onions growing. And you can take little sprigs off of your onions. If you take only 1 or 2 off of each onion, then you're not harming the onion at all. It will continue to grow. And you can use those sprigs in your salad as well as onion greens. And the ones that I'm harvesting from here, that was the reason that I planted them to begin with. It wasn't actually for the bulb, it was for the onion greens themselves. And then I have 1 radish. These are the radishes that have just started to come up. And that little one right there is the only one that really it isn't ready to pick, but I decided to pick it anyway because I wanted to see how it tasted. So that's the only one that I did pick out of those. But I added that one in my salad as well. So you can go through your garden if you planted any spring things and just take little pieces off of each plant, even though they're not ready as a full plant to just pull up. But you can, I actually don't even pull mine up ever. I just, until they're completely finished, I just leave them and take leaves from them off of the edges. And then the plant continues to grow all season. And this is my salad, and my brother and his wife have chickens, and they gave me some eggs, so those are fresh chicken eggs. And then my neighbor made this jalapeno salt, which is delicious, and she gave me some, and I've been using it on so many things, and it's great on this salad. So if you don't want to make jelly with Redbud, but you do have access to some Redbuds, this is a great way to add them into your diet. Okay, so here I have the Redbuds. You need to rinse them off and remove any debris that might be on them. And then using a canning jar, I just fill it up with the buds. And this is a quart-size canning jar, and when I finish filling it up, it holds 4 cups of Redbuds. So even if you don't pick 4 cups, there's a stem that I'm showing you that got missed, and so if you run across that, just take it out and use the rest of it. And the little flower petals have little stems on them, and it's a good idea to remove as many of those as you can, but if you don't get all of them, that's okay. So just continue filling up your jar and then measure them to see how many you have. So in this recipe, if you have 2 cups, for example, of Redbuds, then you need to boil 2 cups of water. If you have 4 cups like I have here, then you boil 4 cups of water. And the reason we're using a canning jar is because it can withstand the heat of this boiling water being poured into it. So once your water is boiling, pour it into your canning jar. And the Redbuds try to rise to the top, so you have to kind of push them back down in there. It looks like my jar is full right now, but it really isn't. It's just because those Redbuds are trying to float on top. So just mash them back down in there, and then finish topping it off with water. And if it doesn't hold the whole 4 cups that you planned, then that's okay. Just fill it up as full as you can get it with water, and mash the red buds down in there as much as you can. And then once this is done, put your canning lid on it, and then leave it sitting out to allow it to cool down. And once it has cooled down, then you put it in the refrigerator and you leave it there overnight. And you take it out the next day and make your jelly with it. So the first day, you're just picking the red buds, cleaning them off, and getting them in the canning jar and steeping them with the boiling water. Put that in the refrigerator, and then you're finished for that day. You do need to use it the next day though, so it doesn't have to be that morning. It can be any time that day, but just take it out of the refrigerator and move on to the next step, which is what I'm about to show you. Okay, so once you've got to the next day, take it out of the refrigerator, and you're going to strain it. And I use a straining bag. It's a cotton bag that's made for straining berries or plant material, whatever you're wanting to strain with it. So I just place it down over my bowl, which in this case is a 4-cup measuring bowl. And this is showing you the red bud after it has sat in the refrigerator overnight. And you can see that it has pulled some of the color from the plants, and that's what you want. It's also pulling whatever nutrients that are in the plant. And all we have to do at this stage is just strain it. So just pour it into your bag, or if you're using a cheesecloth or whatever you're using to strain it with, pour it in, and the liquid will, for the most part, come out first, but you still need to get all those little blooms out of there as well, because you're going to be squeezing them to get as much juice as you can out of it also. You want to get as much as possible from the juice. So at this point here, and this is why I like these little bags, they stay as a bag so it don't fall through or anything. And just keep twisting it and squeezing it to get all the juice out. And then once you're done with that, just put that aside, and you can deal with that later. Or if you want, your juice can just sit there while you dump out the remaining parts of the bulbs. But I just set mine aside. And then the next step that we're going to do is to add lemon juice to this tea that we have made. So once you finish straining it, I'm just pouring it back in the jar so that you can see the next step better. But you could leave it in your pitcher if you want to. Okay, so I like to use fresh lemon juice. And I don't measure the amount here. I use 1 whole lemon, and I squeeze it to get all of the juice out of it. So this is showing you what it looks like before we add the lemon juice to it, because the lemon juice does change the color just a little bit. It's not a dramatic change, but it does kind of brighten it up, I guess. So in a separate container, squeeze out your lemon juice, and then once you've got both halves of it squeezed and you've got as much juice out of it as you can get out, then strain that so that you can remove the seeds and any pulp that went in there, because all you want is just the juice. Okay, so now I'm going to add that into my jar of Redbud tea. And I'm taking another one out because I actually did 2 full jars. The only one I'm going to be showing you is just that first one that I did, but I've actually done 2 whole quarts of Redbud tea. The other one I'm going to be using for something other than making jelly with it. But I have them both setting out so that you can see the color difference that it makes. And you really can't tell a whole lot with this particular jelly, but it does brighten it just a little bit. And then it brightens it a little bit more while you're cooking it. So that's the only purpose for that other jar sitting there. So once you add your lemon juice to it, just stir it up a little bit. And I'm putting the lid back on it just so I can tilt it enough to show you the difference in the two. And I think you can tell there a little bit that it's a little brighter. Looks a little clearer maybe with the lemon juice in it than it did without it. See, there's just a slight difference in the color. I just want you to know that it will affect the color to a degree. Okay, so now I'm pouring it back into my measuring bowl, and that's simply because I prefer to pour from it than to pour from the jar. You could leave it in your jar if you want to and pour just from that. So now you're going to set your juice that has the lemon added into it aside. And if you haven't already done this stage, then make sure that you have cleaned and sterilized all the jars that you're going to be using to put this in. And that you have, after you have sterilized them, you take them out of the water. And it needs to be in boiling water for at least 10 minutes to sterilize. And then take them out and put them on a sterile surface. I'm using parchment paper on a baking sheet. I turn them upside down on there and place them in an oven that you have preheated to around 200 degrees. All you're trying to do is keep them hot while you are doing the rest of the process. They are already sterile, so the oven part is not making them sterile, it's just keeping them hot. And also take your canning lids and rings and put them in a separate container, a pan, on the stove, but you don't bring them to a boil, maybe on simmer or something. The ingredients that you're going to need now is the Sure Gel and your sugar. And again, your sugar is the same amount that you have in juice. So if you have 2 cups of juice, you will need to have 2 cups of sugar ready. And this has already had the lemon juice in the step before. So if you have not added your lemon juice yet, then this is when you would add it. So you pour it in there, and then the next thing that you're going to do is add your box of pectin. And I use a full box of pectin if I have at least 3 cups of juice. If you have less than 3 cups of juice, then I would use a half a cup of pectin. And that would be if you have at least 2 cups, but less than 3 cups, then use a half a box of pectin. So as soon as you pour the pectin in, start stirring it and bring this to a full rolling boil. And that means that it's boiling. Even though you're stirring it, the boil isn't going down. It's still a full boil. Once you get it to that stage, then you add your sugar. And it needs to be poured in all at one time, which is why it's a good idea to have it measured out ahead of time. So pour the whole thing in, continue stirring, and make sure that you're stirring this the whole time that it's on the stove. These jellies are easy to burn if you just let them sit there and boil without stirring them. And also make sure that the pan that you use is deep enough to allow this to boil without boiling over. And it can get up pretty high, so make sure you're using a pan that allows for that. So back there on the back of the stove are my lids and rings, and as you can see, they're not boiling, they're just heating. So just low enough to heat them up. All you're trying to do is keep them heated. Okay, so now I have reached the full boil with the sugar, and that is 2 minutes that it has to boil. So once it starts boiling, a full rolling boil, then start your timer and time it for 2 minutes, and then take it off the stove eye. And I have already taken it off and poured it back into my pitcher, my measuring pitcher or measuring bowl, whatever you want to call it. And I use that because it's so much easier to fill the jars with that than to spoon it in there. And you just watched me remove the jars from the oven, so they're hot, and the jelly is hot. So be sure that you're careful with this because you can burn yourself. But this makes it a lot easier to fill your jars this way and not make a big mess. So just go through and fill each of your jars. And I had just a little bit left over, so I just added it into that other jar just so I could taste of it, but also so I could see if it's going to gel properly. And once you have all of the jelly poured in the jars, even if you think that it didn't get anything at all on the rim of the jar, just use a wet paper towel or a wet cloth and wipe off the tops of each jar. If anything is on there, even just a drop of the jelly, it could affect how the jar seals and make it actually not seal. So put your lids on and your rings, and remember at this stage those jars are very hot. So you can screw them on a little bit by hand without the aid of anything, but once you need to do the finger tight part, tighten it up finger tight, then you need a cloth. I just use a dish towel to hold on to the jar so that I can tighten it without burning my fingers. Okay, so now it's time to put it back in your canner. I leave the same water in there that I used to sterilize the jars with, so it's already hot, but it's not boiling yet. So place all your jars in your canner, and you've got to bring this back to a boil again. And you start timing it once it is back at the boil. So once you have all your jars in there, place the lid on it. Have your stove turned on high, and bring this back to a boil. Boil it for, in my area, it's for 10 minutes. So you're really going by what your sea level is of elevation, but I think for most people in the United States, it's 10 minutes that you boil. If you don't know what your sea level is, then check it and see what your boil time should be. And the reason for boiling it is that if it boils for at least 10 minutes in my area, then that removes any germs or bacteria that may still be on those jars or lids or in the jelly itself, and that makes it shelf stable for canning. And at this stage, you remove all of the jars I tilt them just a little bit to get the excess water off the top, but then I sit them there and I leave them there overnight and I don't touch them again. So even though there's still some water drops up there on the lids, I just let it sit there, because if you start messing with those lids, just the slightest bit can cause them not to seal or to do a false seal. Once you have finished that, make sure that you leave it overnight undisturbed, and then write what it is that is in that jar and the date that you did it. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope you will give these a try. The jelly is delicious. The color is beautiful. The main ingredient, which is the red buds, is completely free. So all you need is the lemon juice, the sugar, and the pectin. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. May God bless you and your family.